The best wedding gift you could possibly give us, Evelyn, would be leaving this family for good. The crowded reception room went dead silent. The string quartet abruptly stopped playing mid-note. My son looked down at his shoes, refusing to meet my eyes. I calmly set down my champagne glass, walked out to the terrace, and made 2 phone calls. They took exactly 14 minutes. What happened in those 14 minutes, and over the 10 days that followed, is why my new daughter-in-law wishes she had chosen her words very carefully. Welcome back to the Last Chapter Stories, where quiet women tell you how they finally stopped paying for other people's entitlement. We share stories about family, financial boundaries, and the exact moment enough becomes enough. If you have ever been the mother who funded everything only to be erased from the picture, this story is for you. Drop a comment below, tell me where you are listening from, and be sure to subscribe. 9 years ago, my husband Arthur collapsed on a job site outside Philadelphia. A sudden stroke. He was 52, I was 49, and our son, Brandon, was 23, 3 weeks out of college with a marketing degree and a brand new car payment. People often ask how I survived that first year. The honest answer is paperwork. Grief comes with a mountain of paperwork, and I happen to be an expert at it. I had spent 20 years building a certified accounting firm out of our spare room. By then, I had 8 employees and half the local businesses in town on my client roster. So when medical bills arrived, I audited them. When the insurance company stalled, I called them every morning at 9:00 a.m. until they paid. Numbers held still for me when the rest of my life was falling apart. Arthur used to tease me, saying I loved a balanced ledger the way other women loved fresh flowers. He wasn't wrong. But standing in that quiet house with a stack of bank folders where my marriage used to be, I started speaking the only language I had left. Mine was money. Brandon would call, and I would hear his father's warm laugh buried deep in his voice. Whatever he needed, my answer was yes before he even finished the sentence. The first check I wrote him was 3 days after the funeral, $1,800 for his apartment rent. It was not the last. The rule of the ledger. At my firm, I gave clients the same speech every tax season. If you can't write it in the ledger where you can see it, it isn't generosity, it's a leak. Then I would go home and wire my son $500 for a weekend trip he had offhandedly mentioned. Brandon never directly begged for money. He would mention things. He'd call on a Sunday, talk about football, and around minute 20 he'd sigh, "The mechanic says the transmission is $1,500. Can you believe that?" By Tuesday, the cash was sitting in his checking account. He never had to lower himself to ask, and I never got the dignity of being asked. The transfers just happened, quiet as a thermostat. Then 6 years ago, my phone rang. It was a debt counselor from Brandon's credit union. $45,000. That was the whole. 5 maxed-out credit cards and a heavy auto loan. Brandon sat at my kitchen table with his ears burning red, looking exactly like he did at age 9 when he broke a neighbor's window. I paid off the entire $45,000 the following Monday, but I did one thing that caught him off guard. I remembered something Arthur used to say, "Paper keeps love clean." I drew up a formal promissory note, a demand note, payable whenever I chose to call it due. Principal, $45,000 with interest pegged to the federal rate so the IRS wouldn't reclassify it as a gift. Brandon signed it right there at the table without reading past line 2. He grinned, said, "Sure, Mom, invoice me," and we ordered dinner. Every December, I officially forgave that year's interest using legal gift exclusions, filing the letters in a private folder. He never made a payment on the principal, and I never asked. For years, that felt like love. A year later, Brandon was 27, and his ruined credit score meant no bank would write him a mortgage. An estate sale put a charming brick home on Chestnut Street on the market. 3 bedrooms, a massive oak tree in the front yard, 15 minutes from my place. $320,000. I bought the house outright in cash, putting my name alone on the deed. Keeping the title wasn't stinginess. I had just watched my son dig a $45,000 pit with a shovel named Optimism. I sat him down and laid out the terms. "This is my property. You live in it and you pay me rent. Someday, when your footing is solid, we'll discuss transferring the deed like adults." $900 a month. Market rate on Chestnut Street was easily $2,200. Brandon hugged me, dubbed it Mom Rent, and moved in. Here is the secret nobody knew. Not Brandon, not my sister Laura, nobody. Every single month when Brandon's $900 hit my checking account, I moved it straight across into a high-yield savings account I had opened under his name. He thought he was paying me. He was actually paying himself. I used to sit with my morning coffee on the first of the month and watch that balance tick upward, imagining the day I would hand it over to him, his wedding day, or when his first child was born. 60 months, $54,000 sitting in a quiet account like a gift wrapped years in advance. I was building proof that I loved him, as if love were a ledger you could audit. 3 years ago, Brandon called with a lift in his voice I hadn't heard since his father passed. "Mom, I met someone." Her name was Chloe Montgomery. The first time she walked into my home, she complimented the custom crown molding before she even greeted me. She was 26, an event coordinator, polished like a magazine spread. During dinner, her eyes didn't rest on people. They appraised the room, scanning my built-in bookshelves, the china cabinet, pricing the artwork on the walls. Over dessert, she raised her wine glass toward my son and smiled. "To self-made men." And Brandon, sitting in a home I owned, driving a car whose tires I had bought, raised his glass and said not a single word of correction. He toasted the fictional man he had invented. I laughed along, because that is what mothers do at formal dinners, but inside, I realized I was sitting across from a fantasy. 2 years ago, Brandon proposed, and Chloe's mother, Victoria Montgomery, hosted an engagement party with a champagne tower. Victoria worked the room like a politician, loudly announcing, "We just adore Brandon. He fits our family like he was made for it." My sister Laura leaned over and whispered the town gossip. The Montgomerys' high-end furniture retail chain had gone bankrupt years ago, and their lakeside home had been foreclosed on. They were keeping up a costly facade on leased luxury sedans and country club memberships they barely maintained. Every sentence my son spoke that year began with "we." Feels strongly about a vineyard venue. We think live quartets are essential. Every "we" included Chloe and excluded me. The wedding invoices never came to me directly. They arrived through subtle hints. Brandon would call to chat about football, then add, "So Pinecrest Estate needs the venue deposit by Friday. $14,000. Venues are crazy, right?" A heavy pause shaped exactly like my checkbook. I wired the $14,000. Then came the artisanal caterer, the floral designer, the custom cake artist, the drone photographer. By wedding week, I had quietly paid out $50,000. I kept every single receipt stapled and categorized in my office safe. Force of habit. Yet I was funding an event I was learning about secondhand. There was a family group chat that I wasn't added to. Victoria Montgomery hosted a bridal luncheon where she tapped her glass and announced to 40 guests how honored she was to be hosting this magnificent wedding for our children. I sat there eating cold salad, having wired her florist $7,000 that very morning. When the formal invitations arrived, heavy cream cardstock, my name was nowhere on them. 3 weeks before the wedding, the couple launched their wedding website. On the Our Story page, Chloe had written a glowing profile of Brandon, a self-made entrepreneur who conquered his 20s, cleared his debts, and purchased his dream home on Chestnut Street before age 30, featuring a high-rise photo of my brick house. I called Brandon that night. "Brandon, the website needs to be corrected." "You cannot build a marriage on a fictional resume. Does Chloe know about the promissory note? Does she know I hold the deed to the house?" Brandon sighed, using the placating tone he reserved for difficult clients. "She knows, Mom. She knows everything. Her family is just sensitive about money and status. Please, don't make this an issue." I stayed quiet for 3 weeks on my son's word. 10 days before the wedding, Brandon came over alone. He paced around my kitchen, talking about weather and sports before finally dropping the ask. "Chloe and I were talking, and regarding the house, we thought it would be an incredible wedding gift if you signed the deed over to both of us. I mean, it's basically ours anyway, Mom." I set my coffee cup down. Basically ours. A script written by someone else and rehearsed in the dark. "That's a major legal document, Brandon," I said evenly. "We can discuss property transfers after the honeymoon with my attorney once the taxes are settled, not in a rush before a wedding." He nodded quickly, disappointed, and left. The moment he walked out, the cold shoulder began. Dress fittings were suddenly just for the bridal party. Texts were answered hours later with single words. Then Chloe made her direct move. She called to inform me that the wedding planner had rebalanced the seating chart. I was being moved from the front family table to table 9. "Table 9 has the absolute best view of the dance floor, Evelyn. We just thought you'd prefer some breathing room away from the main noise. I checked the floor plan I had paid for. Table 9 was in the far back corner, directly next to the swinging kitchen service doors. The wedding day at Pinecrest Estate was visually flawless. $50,000 of my money transformed the venue into a fairy tale, vines draped over white arbors, a live string quartet, 6-tiered cake. When I arrived, every vendor bypassed Victoria and came straight to me. The florist needed approval on a rose swap. The caterer verified final head counts. The photographer confirmed the shot list. They looked for the woman whose signature was on their checks. The venue manager, a polite young man with a clipboard, approached me. Mrs. Mercer will run the final remaining balance on the catering and bar service tonight on the same card used for the deposit, correct? I confirmed it was fine. During the ceremony, I sat in row 2. In his vows, Brandon thanked God, the officiant, and Victoria Montgomery for making this dream day possible. He never mentioned my name. I sat upright, keeping my smile steady, my thumb tracing the edge of the clutch in my lap. Inside my clutch was a thick white envelope containing my intended gift. 1. A cashier's check for $54,000, all 60 months of his rent, returned. 2. The $45,000 promissory note, stamped, paid in full and forgiven. 3. A signed letter of intent to transfer the Chestnut Street house, deed to them post-honeymoon. I was holding $99,000 in financial freedom, waiting for the right private moment after the speeches. At the reception, table 9 was indeed touching the kitchen doors. Every time a waiter passed with a tray, the doors swung open, blasting warm air across my chair. The printed place card read, Donna Mercer. They had bought a vowel off someone else's name with my money. I took out my pen, neatly corrected the O to an E, and sat down. Near the end of dinner, the venue manager threaded his way through the tables, clipboard in hand, and approached table 9. It was a lull between songs, and his polite voice carried over the surrounding tables. Mrs. Mercer, I have the final invoice for the venue overtime and bar balance. I just need your final signature to process the card. The words echoed. Forks paused midair. 8 feet away, Victoria Montgomery froze solid, her fake smile locking up as her eyes did rapid, panicked math. I signed my name, placed the receipt back in my clutch next to the white envelope, and thanked the manager. Victoria immediately rushed over to Chloe, whispering frantically in her ear. I watched my new daughter-in-law's face flush with anger. Chloe set her glass down and marched across the dance floor straight toward table 9. She didn't lower her voice, she pitched it to Carrie. Evelyn, I'm so glad I caught you, Chloe announced, flashing a sharp, rehearsed smile. You've done so much. Everyone knows how involved you love to be, which is why I hope you'll understand what I'm about to say, because I mean it with love. She paused, letting the room quiet down. Brandon and I have everything we need now, so the absolute best wedding gift, the very best gift you could give us, honestly, would be you leaving this family for good. A collective gasp rippled through the room. The cellist lifted her bow mid-note. Victoria stood with her chin high, watching like a general overseeing a battle. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I turned my head and looked past Chloe to my son. Brandon stood near the head table in his tailored tuxedo. He had heard every word his wife said to his mother in front of 200 guests. He looked down at his shoes. He twisted his new gold wedding band around his finger, studying the floorboards as if searching for a structural defect. 3 seconds passed. 4. He said nothing. In those 4 seconds, my entire internal ledger balanced. The answer to the question I had spent 9 years avoiding was right there. If the money stopped, would he stay? His shoes were more compelling than my dignity. I stood up. I placed my full champagne glass next to the card that read Donna, and I walked, unhurried with my head held high, out through the terrace doors. The terrace was cool and quiet under the string lights. My hands were perfectly steady. I dialed my attorney, Thomas Blake. He answered on ring 3. Evelyn, aren't you at the wedding? I am, I said calmly. Thomas, take these instructions. 1. Call the $45,000 promissory note on Monday morning. Full principal demand, by the book, with the standard installment option attached. 2. Draft a codicil removing Brandon and his heirs entirely from my estate will. 3. Begin the legal paperwork to transfer the Chestnut Street property into my living asset trust immediately. Thomas paused. Are you certain, Evelyn? I have never been more balanced in my life, I replied. Next, I called my bank's private client line. I permanently revoked all automated allowances, recurring phone plan coverage, car insurance subsidies, and secondary card authorizations linked to Brandon. Total time on the phone, 14 minutes. I closed my phone, opened the glass doors, and walked back inside the reception tent. I didn't grab the microphone. I didn't cause a scene. I walked over to my son, who stood pale and nervous near the cake table. I placed a hand softly on his arm, the same gesture I used at his father's funeral. The promissory note is called on Monday, I whispered gently in his ear. The Chestnut Street house is being placed into my private trust this week. My attorney will send everything in writing so nobody has to remember anything incorrectly. His face drained of all color. Mom, Chloe started walking toward us, but I patted his arm twice. Enjoy the party, sweetheart, I smiled. It's fully paid for. I walked out past Victoria's frozen smile, past the gift table where my clutch and the $99,000 white envelope inside it remained firmly with me. At the exit, I authorized a final $300 card charge for the band's overtime so the innocent guests could enjoy their night, and I drove home in absolute, peaceful silence. On Monday morning, Attorney Blake's formal legal notices were dispatched. By Wednesday afternoon, the actual math of Brandon's life hit their mailbox. 1. Demand on promissory note. $45,000 due in 30 days, or structured at $200 month minimum under strict terms. 2. Notice of occupancy. Chestnut Street tenants must either sign a formal lease at market rate, $2,200 month, secure an independent mortgage to purchase the home at appraised value, or vacate within 90 days. 3. Estate revision. Codicil executed, property transferred into trust. Wednesday evening, my phone rang. Brandon had put me on speakerphone, likely by accident while frantically shuffling papers. I heard the entire row unfolding in the background of my rental property. Chloe's voice was high, terrified, and furious. What is this, Brandon? Why does this legal letter say your mother owns the house? You told me the debts were a rumor she started. You told me you own this place. Brandon's voice was breaking. Chloe, calm down, let me explain. You let me marry a man who owns nothing, she screamed. The illusion had completely shattered. Chloe hadn't just married for love. She believed she was marrying into security, her escape from her family's past bankruptcies. Instead, she had married the most indebted man in the county. Mom, please say something, Brandon pleaded into the phone. She asked for the truth as a wedding gift, Brandon, I said softly. Tell her it's from me. I hung. On Thursday, Victoria Montgomery arrived at my home in her leased sedan, wearing her full socialite uniform, pearls, blazer, and a tight smile. She stood on my porch with a velvet crowbar approach. Evelyn, surely we can be reasonable. Emotions ran high with champagne, but sending lawyers to children, family doesn't invoice family. I looked at her and replied, funny, I've been the invoice for 9 years. You toasted your family's new beginning with flowers paid for by my credit card. Her smile faltered. People will talk, Evelyn. A mother who financially attacks her only son over a seating chart. That story will follow you everywhere. Let it, I said, and closed the door. A week later, Brandon came to my house alone. He sat in his usual chair at my kitchen table, looking exhausted and worn thin. He poured a cup of coffee and delivered a carefully rehearsed proposal. Mom, Chloe knows things got out of hand. She's willing to move past it. If you call the lawyer, put the house and note back the way they were, and give a brief apology to her at Thanksgiving in front of the family, we can put this behind us. You'll be back in for holidays, Sunday dinners, and when we have kids, you'll get to be a grandmother. He laid his final card on the table. Access to future grandchildren priced at my total humiliation and submission. I looked at my son. I refilled his coffee. Then I looked him in the eye and said, no. I am not apologizing for being insulted. A woman asked 200 people to witness my eviction from this family, and I will not stand in front of those same people and call that my fault. Here are the real terms. You and Chloe can pay market rent, $2,200, or buy the house at full appraisal. The $45,000 note will be paid back at $200 a month. For 9 years, Brandon, I paid for everything so I would never have to ask if you'd stay if I stopped paying. That was my mistake. I will always be your mother, but I am officially done being your bank. Brandon stood up, his face hardening. Then you're going to end up completely alone, Mom. You get that, right? She won't come back from this. I let the threat land. Maybe, I said, but I'll be someone's mother, not someone's wallet. Whenever you can tell the difference between the two, my front door works just fine. He walked out. It has been over a year now. The world didn't end. Brandon and Chloe decided to stay in the Chestnut Street house, and every month on the 1st, $2,200 in market rent is automatically transferred to my account. It is the coldest money I have ever received, but it is entirely clean. In March, a thin envelope arrived in my mailbox. Inside was a check for $200 in Brandon's handwriting. On the memo line, he wrote one word: March. No note, no long speech. Just a 32-year-old man finally taking accountability for his own debt. I deposited it. The white envelope, with the $54,000 cashier's check and the house transfer documents, still sits inside my safe deposit box. The gift is there if true maturity ever claims my son. I am 59 now, and if I learned one thing from Table 9, it is this: if the only seat a family saves for you is the one your money sits in, stand up and walk away. You can owe a mother everything and never once be invoiced, but anyone who forgets that was never counting you as family. They were only counting what they could get out of you. Thank you for listening to the last chapter stories. If this story resonated with you, hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more stories of quiet strength. Until next time, keep your paperwork clean and your boundaries strong.